Welcome to Diet Rebellion, the podcast that's here to help you break free from the chains of dieting and finally take control of your health, strength, and confidence. I'm Joe Hoye, your host and the founder of Diet Detox. After transforming the lives of thousands of women over 40 who have been trapped in the endless diet cycle, I'm here to show you a new way. One that focuses on eating for your body's needs, restoring your metabolism, and rebuilding your strength for life. Get ready for real, no bullshit conversations, expert insights, and actionable strategies that empower you to live diet-free and thrive. It's time to stop restricting and start rebuilding. Join the rebellion. Your journey starts now. Welcome back to Menopause from a Man. Today, I had an amazing conversation with Jenn Trepeck. She's been described as a force of nature in the wellness space. You're going to see why soon. She's been recognized as one of Podcast Magazine's 40 Under 40, nominated for the 2022 International Women's Podcast Award for Visionary Leadership, and won Earworthy's first independent podcast award for Best Health Podcast in 2024. Currently, Jenn is a nominee for the 2024 Women in Podcasting Awards for Best Health Podcast and Best Guest Expert. She's an optimal health coach, podcaster, and business consultant. Jenn grew up the skinny one in a family of dieters, which she says was awesome until it went away, and so began her own weight management saga. Ultimately though, Jenn learned the nutrition education we're all supposed to know but no one ever taught us, and by learning that, it completely changed her life and allowed her to say she kicked her food issues. From then, Jenn set out on a mission to pay it forward and help people help themselves. After over a decade of working with clients, Jenn started Salad with a Side of Fries podcast, which yours truly will be on very soon. Based on science, yet lighthearted, Jenn talks about living life while still making ourselves and our health a priority. And in today's episode, we talked about how she goes about coaching, how she is not asking her clients to track calories, but still creating massive success, and how our programs actually aren't all that different from each other. Aside from that, we talk about a whole lot more. We keep it extremely fun. I think this was one of the most fun podcast episodes I've recorded yet, and I hope you enjoy. Jenn, welcome to Menopause from a Man. I'm really glad because you just made the cutoff. As we discovered in the green room, you don't look like you are above 40, but lo and behold, you're 41, and
yes.
you're welcome
Well, first
on the
of all,
show.
thank you. Yeah. I'm glad I made the cut, but thank you. I appreciate that. I think it's funny because growing up, like when I was in my teens and 20s, everybody always thought I was older than I was.
Wow.
And then around my late 20s, it all just started to go the other direction. Everybody now thinks I'm younger than I am, which I'm not mad about. I'll take it.
So you reverse Benjamin Buttoned.
Yeah.
That's good. What's the secret?
I think quality nutrition, a healthy lifestyle, which sounds really lame. I'm not going to lie, right? And then also I think really good skincare.
Yeah. So it's funny you say, it's not all that sexy, the things that I do to just age well, but I just had a conversation with Barbie Bulls. That episode will be out before yours. And we were talking about brain health. And it was the same exact. I was like, okay, Barbie, so what do we need to do in order to avoid dementia or at least lessen our likelihood of getting it? She's like, Joe, it's really not that sexy. You just have to live a good lifestyle. And if you do that, chances are you're better than 90% of people. And I was like, wow, that sounds
totally
similar. So what is it that got you into this, Jenn? What got you into health coaching?
Yeah. Well, so my background is really business and marketing, and I came to all the wellness stuff, like so many of us, through my own saga. I call it a saga because I feel like the word journey doesn't do it justice, right? There was drama. It was a roller coaster, So I grew up a dancer, and I always joke that I was the skinny one in a family of dieters. But really, it was just that I was surrounded by every fad diet and theory my entire life. So when I started to gain weight between high school and college, I was like, okay, I know what to do because I watched my family do this my whole life, right? And I did every diet under the sun, gaining and losing, living that life of, feeling invincible and then feeling like there's something wrong with me, Yep. And, in that process, I had also, I'm living that roller coaster. I graduated from the University of Michigan Business School, moved to New York, working full time, and was like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do. I just know that I'm not going to work for somebody else for the rest of my life.
Yes.
And so I was looking for things to do in my spare time to either make extra money and invest it and then retire early or somehow work for myself. And those two worlds collided when I learned about the curriculum that I based my entire practice on. And essentially, I call it the nutrition education we're all supposed to know and no one ever taught us. Because it was like all of a sudden, food decisions were intellectual rather than emotional. So working in a hedge fund, I could go into the kitchen on a Monday morning and the 3 mini croissants and stuff that were there had a voice, right? And I could go in there and get water like maybe once or twice and like ignore the voice that was coming from the mini croissant. But usually by the third time, I'm like, oh, what's wrong with me? We give in, we eat the thing, and then we're like, why do I suck?
Yeah.
Right? Why can't I just not eat it? And so what I learned was why that was appealing to me, why that croissant had a voice, what I needed to do instead. And then I could make a different decision about the croissant, right? So it completely changed my life. And I was like, everybody deserves this information. And why isn't this what we learn? So I became an insatiable student, went to every seminar and training and workshop and read every book I could get my hands on. And I became a health coach on the side of my full-time job. I built my practice for 12 years as a side hustle, left my full-time job July of 2019, launched my podcast, Salad with a Side of Fries, in August of 2019. And now fast forward, I get to sit here with you, Joe, helping thousands of women and men around the world look better, feel better, have more energy, and age well, but live the lives focusing on what's really important to them.
Pretty good job, huh?
It's the best.
I love that. So, wow, for 12 years, you built this practice on the side.
Yeah, it was a lot.
What was your main gig? What was your main job?
So when I very first started, I was a photo shoot producer, sort of in the marketing advertising world. And then I worked on the administrative end of a couple different hedge funds. And I was like, made some great money, but always knew that that was not my future, you know?
Yeah, I think for a lot of business owners, it's like, you know what? I really don't like people telling me what to do all day long. I'm going to tell myself what to do. And even if it includes more work, we're generally happier.
100%. I probably have never worked harder than when working for myself, but also like I enjoy it and I'm doing it for me. Like I'm reaping the rewards, even if they're delayed, right? Compared to working for someone else. But yeah.
Yeah. And the rewards also now are not making other people money. It's making other people live longer, be healthier, be happier, be more confident. And like that reward alone is priceless.
1,000%.
I love it.
For sure.
So I'm curious, what is your take on the right way to do things to help somebody achieve a goal and keep it? Because we all have different takes. And I don't think all of them are wrong. I think some certainly are, but not all.
Yeah. And so I am a big stickler for even the words that we use. So I'm not even going to tell someone that what they're doing is wrong, right? I say the word right as in like the conversation, but I don't even use that word either to describe our habits, our behaviors, right? There are things that we can do that are going to move us closer to where we want to be, things that are going to move us further from where we want to be. And there are even things that will move us in either direction faster. So everything is really just about choices and learning to make aligned choices based on what we really desire. Now, with all that said, right, there's a lot of things out there that make those aligned choices a lot more difficult. So fundamentally on the nutrition piece, all right, so I'll give you guys one of my sayings. So any note takers, you're going to write this down. Protein and fiber at every meal makes your moving fat no big deal. Protein and fiber at every meal makes your moving fat no big deal. So protein is clean, lean protein. I don't care if it is animal or plant or a combination or something that we haven't even discovered yet, right? Clean, lean protein. Fiber is vegetables and sometimes fruit. A meal is actually any time we eat. The only difference between a meal and a snack is how much food we have at a time, and then therefore when we need to fuel again, right? And then the other thing that we need every day, which somehow I'll figure out how to get into like the cute sentence, is our quality fat. So we're going to also have some quality fat a couple times a day. On that note, a serving of quality fat is half of an avocado. It is a handful of walnut or almond. So many people come to me and they're concerned that, they're eating too much fat or, the nuts are the problem. And it's like, I promise you, we're not in this place because of the nut that you're eating.
Right. It's the nuts never made somebody fat.
Right. Exactly. And by the way, that also is not what created heart disease either. That was based on one study, one time that has never been replicated. And the food industry just ran with it.
Yeah. So we're really close on the nutrition standards of like, hey, just have protein and just have fiber every meal. By the way, I'd really prefer that you eat those first because it's going to do a better job of your blood sugar. I love that.
Exactly.
And before we dive further, I think it's going to help to define who you help, right? Because I think everybody needs similar things things, but everybody needs slight nuances. So is there a certain demographic that you like to work with, or do you just help everyone?
So my typical client is 40 plus. I
Okay.
have worked, I've also worked with teens and, an age range, whatever. But typically, we're talking 40 to 80, which I know is a range. But I say that because even what we're doing at 40 is different than what we're doing at 70, 80. And mostly women, although I also work with men a lot.
Mhm.
And specialty wise, it's weight management, metabolic health, cardiovascular health are sort of my bread and butter. And then, of course, within that, we're also looking at sleep and stress and energy and food sensitivities and all the other things, behavior wise, and all that stuff that makes this not quite so easy.
Yeah, I love that. So knowing this, right, because a lot of this is similar to who we're talking to on this podcast right now. Knowing this and knowing that you grew up around a family that was doing every fad diet all the time, have you found any clients or anybody that spends time in your community that's actually eating a really small amount of food already and they're not
All
losing
the
weight?
time.
Yeah.
I would say a vast majority of the people who come to me are under eating or they are overeating and undernourished.
Yes. So what does that mean?
So under eating, we're pretty clear on,
Right.
right? Because, and of course we are, because we've been told our entire lives to eat less, move more,
Yep.
right? And so we think hunger is the enemy. We think a craving is a moral failing, right? And we do everything in our power to eat less. In reality, though, if our body doesn't have the foundational nutrients to function, it will hold on to everything it gets, right? This
Yes.
goes back to your thing about blood sugar. So we could go through, but really whether we are burning fat or storing fat is a function of blood sugar. So that's one. And then the overeating and undernourished is our standard American diet that we eat a lot of what I call food-like substances, things that look like food and taste like food, but aren't actually offering the body nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I think that most people have heard of it as like empty calories.
Yep.
Right? So it's empty calories, but there's a lot more that falls into that category than we realize.
Like what? Because
And
I was just going to say, because that does bring us into the empty calorie conversation of, okay, so two people are eating 1,200 calories a day. We understand that both of them are likely under eating, but one's eating 1,200 calories in high protein, high fiber foods, and the other is eating 1,200 calories of popcorn.
Right.
Is there a difference?
1,000%, right? And by the way, nobody needs our education to know that, right? Because a calorie is not a calorie. We know that if we eat Skittles versus a cucumber, the body is going to respond differently. Our energy is going to respond differently. So, like we could get into the science and the chemistry of what our body does with food, but fundamentally, like you don't even have to know that, right? Because we know a calorie is not a calorie. So, which is part of why I don't count calories. I don't encourage my clients to count calories. I think they are potentially one of the worst barometers for choosing a food.
Okay.
Because it's not the number of calories that are really going to impact our health. It's the quality of those calories.
Yeah.
So the question becomes, how do we determine the quality of those calories? Well, what nutrients are those calories giving us? And there are a lot of times where by looking at the calories, someone's going to say, wait a minute, I really don't want to eat a handful of nuts. And yet their hair is falling out, their skin is dry, they're not pooping, and we go, we need some fat in our nutrition, right? We're malnutritioned in some way. So it's the quality of the calories that make the difference. So when we're reading a label, I actually teach people to ignore the calories and look at the rest of the information and be able to understand what we're looking at in order to make our food choices that way.
I love that. And so I'm interested because that's completely different than what we do. We have the same agreement that calories are not equal and that there's definitely more quality. And by having more quality, everything is going to work better. But we have our clients track their calories, among other things. So then if somebody has no idea how many calories they're eating, how are you creating weight loss?
So it happens because the body, when it gets what it needs, we can respond to hunger and satiety hormones, right? We can recognize when we are hungry, when we are done eating, when we actually crave sugar versus craving an apple, right? We can learn the signals of our bodies, and building muscle muscle dictates metabolism.
Mm-hmm.
The calories will take care of themselves when we focus on nutrients. And part of that is also that people I work with have a long history of diet. They have a long history of paying attention to what's in the magazines and what their friends are doing and what's happening on social media. And by that token, a lot of the work is around unlearning those pieces.
I love it.
So it becomes a conflict in our minds if we're saying count calories but don't pay attention to them, right? So we don't have to pay attention to them if we're focusing on the nutrient. If my clients, right, one of the things we track and we focus on is 8 to 12 servings of vegetables a day, protein every time we eat, understanding the serving size based on ounces or, eyeballing it, right? Looking at our hands and eyeballing it, and then quality fat a couple times a day, they have a hard time eating enough.
That's generally what we see.
Right. And so we don't have to worry about the calories. If what you're eating are those foods, I'm not worried.
Right.
You'll end up, right? Especially then too, if we're building muscle, right? Pick up heavy things, put them back down, right? Resistance training, walk, and eat for nutrition. You're going to see the body respond.
I love it.
Then we can get into the nuances of saying, we're going to make sure that we're getting protein, if not a full meal, within an hour of waking up. We're going to make sure that we're not starting our day with coffee. We're going to make sure that we're ending nutrition at an appropriate time based on bedtime at the end of the day, right? And when we start to put all the pieces together, the body will release the fat stores that it's been holding on to. And if you don't have fat stores to release, it's not going to. And yet you will see the health improvement from providing your body nutrition.
Yeah, I love that. And so it sounds like you're still educating around the essential nutrients that your body needs.
1,000%. Everything we focus on is education, right? I work with clients for 12 weeks. So it's a 12-week curriculum to really learn or relearn nutrition, how foods impact our bodies, how we choose foods. And then we also get into food sensitivities and sleep and stress and changing behaviors and dealing with holidays and all the stuff that comes up.
Yeah, I love that. And so you work with them for 12 weeks. So that's different as well. We do one-on-one coaching. There's no defined end date. We work with somebody until they're ready to graduate because, we have ladies that want to lose 150 pounds and ladies that want to lose.
For sure. For sure. And it's a 12-week curriculum. Depending at the end of those 12 weeks, some people are like, I got this. And I'm like, yeah, you do. And some people will say the accountability is really helpful. I want to do another 12 weeks. Mm-hmm. And it's like, great. Some people will switch from one-on-one to group or vice versa. They'll go from group to one-on-one. And there are some people who do, the 12 week and then go it alone for a while and then come back to say, okay, I'm ready for the next level, and kind of revisit the education. And now they hear different things because they're in a different place. I do think, and I always say this to everybody, it takes a minimum a year to start to feel like this lifestyle, this new approach, this new lifestyle is fully in our, in our lives, right? Yeah, because we can, yes, like in the 12 weeks that I work with somebody, they likely have a vacation. There's likely a holiday, right? We are able to tackle some of those kinds of things. But also for some people, what happens at New Year's is very different than what happens at Thanksgiving.
It takes to build basically a new lifestyle or really concrete habits. And they showed that generally it's 18 months. So I would say that your year is pretty darn close.
Yeah.
Right.
And going back like 18 months, by the way, think for everybody too. I don't know about you. When I was growing up, everybody told us 21 days to make a habit.
I know.
Right. And then we all think we suck. Right. Like that's not it at all. And by the way, since, lifestyle shift, 1,000% 18 months, that makes total sense to me. A single habit was 21 days is now 66 based on the research. Yeah. So think about it. The pandemic, like everything in our lives changed, right? Our attention, our, capacity for delayed gratification is shorter than ever. And so it takes more time to add a single new habit into our lives.
It takes more time and more discipline too, because we're getting distracted so much. Yeah. One thing you said is that when we were talking about nutrition and all of that, you're like, well, we also have a focus on building muscle. And then we know that muscle is going to convert to metabolism, which again, exactly the thing that we talk about. So this is not a surprise to the listeners, but it sounds to me like you might not be after weight loss, right? It sounds to me like you're probably after fat loss and body composition more.
1,000%. To me, weight loss is a misnomer.
Mm-hmm.
And most people who say they're looking for weight loss are really interested in fat removal and body composition, because losing weight, making that number on the scale go down, does not inherently improve health. Most of the things that we have done before, when we dramatically cut calories, when we cut out whole food groups, when we do all the things that we have been told over the years to do, the number on the scale goes down for a finite period of time, right? And as that's happening, what we're losing by body composition is water, muscle, and bone. Losing water, muscle, and bone deteriorates health. It does not improve it, which is why BMI based on height and weight is such a terrible metric. And then in that process, right, we lose the weight as water, muscle, and bone. The scale stops moving because the body starts to try to protect itself, because the body's job is survival. So the scale stops moving. We get frustrated. We also did something that feels totally unsustainable, right? To make that happen. So we go back to old eating habits. We're now gaining the weight back, but we have less muscle on our body as we eat more food and eat higher, like a greater number of calories, but less nutrient dense calories, hopefully, right? But we eat those old foods again. We're gaining the weight back. We have less muscle to be burning that extra fuel, and we gain it back as fat. So over time, every time we have lost weight and gained it back, even if we end up at the same number on the scale as we were before, by body composition, we can be fatter at that same number.
Absolutely.
So the objective is fat removal, which improves health. So weight management is my specialty. We focus on removing fat as how we are managing that. But the piece that I will say, and why sort of, even when I started and I was in my 20s doing this, my clients were always 40 plus, because I have always approached this from the health perspective. And so with the health perspective, the weight is the side effect versus the cause, right? So we're going to remove the fat. Our health is going to improve. Our body composition is going to improve. And so the weight loss, right, that everybody is looking for in their 20s isn't my approach, because I come from the perspective that health is our top priority versus a size, if that makes sense.
Oh my God, that makes total sense. You're preaching to the choir. That's what we say all the time, is like, look, fad diets are not good. And not only because they're not going to work long term, but because every time you do one and fall off, you don't go back to where you were. You become, and I know you're not a big better or worse fan, but you become a worse version of yourself. You become a less healthy version of yourself, because
right. Well, we become metabolically challenged.
Right, exactly. And then by being metabolically challenged, it only makes your next weight loss attempt, fat loss attempt, more difficult, because now you have less muscle to help you metabolize and use the energy that you take in. And so now you're just fighting a steeper and steeper uphill battle every single time you do a fad diet.
And we think that there's something wrong with us, right?
Yeah.
So if there's one thing that everybody walks away from this with, I hope it is that nothing is wrong with you. You have not failed. All of those things have failed you, and that it is 100% chemical. It is chemical that you crave those processed foods. It is chemical that once you start eating, you feel like you can't stop. It is chemical that we don't realize we're hungry until we then see food. And then we feel like we're ravenous and we're going to eat everything on the table plus the table itself, right? Like all of that is chemical. And so when we start to shift in this direction and make these other choices, everything gets easier. It's no longer trying to climb Mount Everest naked and barefoot.
I would say a lot of it's chemical, and a lot of it is, and this could be just the same way, that the same thing that you mean, but a lot of it's chemical and a lot of it is by design, right? The sweet foods, the salty foods, the foods that you crave have had millions of dollars invested in them so that you crave them 24/7, right?
Yeah.
And so now it's nobody's fault except for the people that did it on purpose. It's
right. So that's one piece of the chemical, right? Is chemicals in our food that turn off our ability to know when we're full. It's the way those foods, like you're saying, like the right number of, salt specks on every chip so that it hits different parts of your taste bud, and not every chip tastes exactly the same. So you keep going back for more. Like there's that piece that's chemical, but there's also hormones in the body that tell us when we're hungry and when we're satisfied. So they're called ghrelin and leptin. And just like we can become insulin insulin resistant. We know that to be diabetes, right? We can become resistant to the hormones that tell us when we're hungry and when we're satisfied. So it's not, yes, it's chemical in the foods that we eat, and it's chemical in what is happening inside in our physiology. So oftentimes what we think is willpower is actually very chemical.
Right. Yeah. No, I love that. That's really well said. I don't like Joe anymore. I don't like the way he does this. I hate tracking these calories. I want to give this a go, but I've tried so many things. I've done all the diets, and I just want to see that this works this way before I do anything. Where does somebody start? Like, what's the top 2, 3, 4 things that somebody should be doing in order to start being successful?
Yeah. Well, I already gave you one: protein and fiber at every meal. Make sure moving fat, no big deal, right?
Right.
So protein and fiber every time you eat. If you just move in the direction of 8 to 12 servings of vegetables a day, protein every time you eat, a proper serving of protein for a biologically female body is 4 to 6 ounces at a meal. So that's your whole hand. A man, that's 6 to 8 ounces. Again, his whole hand.
You could
And
stop
then,
there. Like,
right.
if somebody followed those 2 steps, right? 8 to 12 servings of vegetables and let's just say 6 ounces of protein, you're successful because it's going to
Yes.
change so many of your other nutritional habits.
Exactly. And then a snack, by the way, because we want protein and fiber every time we eat. So a snack for everybody is 2 to 3 ounces of protein. So that's like the palm of your hand, a little less, right? So if we did those, you want to add to that your quality fat 2 to 3 times a day. Great. And that's our jumping off point. I would also say to somebody is if you're starting your day with coffee, or you are attempting to fast without paying attention to the time of day and the expectations of our body and mind to perform, that's another place to start. So I recommend we want fuel in our system within an hour of waking up. We want that to be protein and fiber, right? Like always, unless it is before dawn. And if we are eating before dawn, protein only, no caffeine. So we're going to hold our coffee until we're eating breakfast or after. Pick one of those things, and you're going to start to see a dramatic change in your energy, your sleep quality, your cravings, right? Everything's going to start to be like, wait a minute, something's different.
Guaranteed everything will change. It's funny because we have overall different approaches, but when we actually look at the sub bullets of each approach, yours and mine, they're the same freaking thing, right? Like if somebody listens to this podcast or listens to me, and you shouldn't be surprised by any of this, but let's play devil's advocate for a minute because I know some of my audience and I know they're going to say, well, I don't like eating meat 6 ounces at every meal and I just don't like vegetables. So then what do you do there?
Yeah. So first of all, we're going to start by eating what you like and not eating what you don't like. The idea that you have to be miserable to be healthy is like, I don't know where that came from. Like, I think it's this old diet stuff of everybody like doing that. Like, I remember once I did the cabbage soup diet, right? Which is basically like you just eat cabbage soup all day, every day.
Yeah.
And it's like, we have tortured ourselves. So let's start by fundamentally saying that torturing yourself is not a way to live your life. Full stop. So we're going to start with eating what you like, not eating what you don't like. And then we learn that our taste buds adjust. So what didn't used to taste sweet, all of a sudden, after a few days, sometime, tastes amazingly sweet. And then we can also look at why don't we like this thing?
Yeah.
Is it a texture thing? Is it how it's cooked? Like if your mom always made you peas and carrots and they were like the frozen ones that were then like cooked to smithereens, like, yeah, I wouldn't like peas and carrots either. But like if we roast carrots, like they get really sweet. So maybe we want to try carrots again.
I love that. Or an answer that I was looking for, or I become better. And so then I train myself to look to have hard conversations because I know I'm going to get something positive in return. And so if we know that through, let's say, always listening to cravings, eating junk food, following fad diets has immediately maybe been rewarding, but long-term it's never rewarding, maybe we're going to learn we don't really love that. And if we start to eat the way that you're saying, Jen, maybe we don't like it immediately. But in a week when the scale goes down or our clothes fit better, and in a month or in a year when everything's changed, it's like, holy shit, wow, you know what? I do kind of like this thing because it did make me into the person that I've always wanted to be.
Exactly. And I see it over and over and over for almost 18 years. It is exactly what happens. But when I start with someone and I tell them that in as little as a week, they're going to think tomatoes are really sweet. They're going to tell me I'm nuts, right? There's pieces of this that you just have to experience. And if you're willing to say, there's probably something I've done before that I either misapplied or I gave it partial effort, right? Or everything I've done it on my own rather than something that's personalized. There's a lot of possibility. We have to be willing to trust a little bit in the process and trust that we've made some mistakes along the way. And so how do we start to then understand what is sustainable? What is sustainable for me? And how does my body respond best? Because as you said in the beginning, right? Like there's so much of this that is fundamentally human that really applies to everybody. The human genome, by the way, is 99.9% the same, but that 0.1% turns out to be things that are really dramatic. And then our lifestyle and the way that we have lived impacts things that make things very different person to person. And so if we're constantly trying to figure that out on our own, it makes it infinitely more difficult. So the more you can work with somebody like Joe or like myself that can help personalize this and make it something that works for you in your life, it is not about contorting your life.
No.
To figure this out.
It's the opposite.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. This was fun, right? I've never
fun.
had the conversation of, hey, we have different programs, but ultimately they're really the same and we deliver results that are real. So thank you for that. Jen, if anybody really resonated with just your personality, how you talk, or the way that you create amazing results, where can they spend time with you? And is there anything else that you want to share with the audience before we wrap this up?
Yeah, for sure. So let's see. All social media, I'm at Jenn Trepeck, JENNTREPECK. Website is asaladwithasideofries.com. Wherever makes sense for you, send a message. Like I love nothing more than hearing from everybody. So please send a message. My podcast is Salad with a Side of Fries. So wherever let's try words. Wherever you're listening, join us over there too. On my website, I have a freebie for you that you can download called It's Not What to Eat, It's How to Eat. Because like we talked about, we know that we're going to eat celery over a Twix and be in a better place. The question though is how do we get to eat the Twix and have it not affect us the same way as it might right now? So all of that is in that download for you.
Awesome. And I'll put that in the show notes so that it's really easy for everybody to go grab. And Jen, once again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe.